Welcome to the lecture series in food technology. The today's topic, what I am going to teach, will be on vitamins in nutrition. So this will be the subject title for food technology series, and under this section we will be covering a wide variety of topics connected with vitamins. And vitamins in nutrition is one of the most essential components where we need to understand how the food could be fortified to enhance its nutritive value. Before I start with this lecture, so I would like to take you to this particular terminology, what we call it like fortification in foods. Many times when you buy products, let's say if you are going to buy a food product, whether it could be a natural food product or it could be a canned food product, you find this particular terminology called fortification of food. So there is this particular word, not only in food products, even in some of the medicines you have this suffix attached called forte, F-O-R-T-E, forte we say, which is basically a Latin word which means fortification. So you know this etymology of the word fortification. It means it's like containing all the essential components as an ingredient kept in a particular food product. So what exactly they mean by fortification? Because the fundamental food substances, whatever you are aware of, consists of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and these essential substances. So if you take a food only rich in protein, carbohydrate or fat, whether the food would be complete? Not necessarily. The food will not be complete at all, and that's what exactly happened way back into the historical aspect of the vitamins. So here you find one of the key scientists, Professor Hopkins. So he is actually the pioneer in food technology studies. So you find here Professor Hopkins, as you can see over here, his picture. So he is actually given the credit of starting the research in vitamins. In fact, he was not the person who introduced the terminology vitamins. The word what he preferred was accessory food factors. So if you look into the history of vitamins, he conducted a series of experiments, especially animal experiments. So what he did was he took lots of batches of mice and he started feeding them exclusively with specific nutrients. I would say he will feed one batch only with carbohydrates. He will make sure he will remove all the ingredients. Then in another batch he will feed them only with proteins, and in the another batch he will feed them only with fatty acids. And he started looking into the physiological changes that's happening in the animal, and this led to some of the key observations where he found some classical symptoms that resembled a disease. Can you see over there this particular disease which was very popular, and even now it's very popular? It's called beriberi. So this is a disease characterized by degenerative changes. The very word beriberi, actually it's a Sinhalese word, which means the person will lose strength, will become very weak over a period of time. And you find the picture of a local person over here. He becomes very lean and he loses all his muscles and his nerves are getting degenerated. So he found some of the mice demonstrated, irrespective of being fed only with carbohydrate or only being fed with fat or protein, they showed symptoms similar to beriberi. So this was very interesting, and what he did was Hopkins actually did some experiments, and he started trying to feed the animal batches with extracts from fruits, extracts from other sources, and he was able to reverse back the symptoms. So this was the key. In fact, this pioneering work was also being parallelly done by one more professor, Professor Christian, and he is a Dutch physician and professor. So these two people, Hopkins and Professor Christian, are considered to be one of the most important people who contributed to the study of vitamins. Although they did not use the word vitamins, their work was recognized well, and it was well read, and it was a real breakthrough in that particular period of time. And you know, they were honored with Nobel Prize. So the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1929 was awarded together for Professor Hopkins and Professor Christian. So this study made people have a fresh outlook on as to how there is an additional ingredient apart from the major or macronutrients, what we call present in the food. Now comes this particular professor, Dr. Funk, Casimir Funk. So he was a Polish scientist. He read all the works of Hopkins and Christian, and he came up with this particular idea of using a word vitamins. So you see over here, he is credited to use this very word vitamin. So what he did was, vita is a Latin word which means life, and he proposed, because the work of these two scientists, Professor Hopkins and Christian, did not specify or pinpoint any key ingredient. They could make a contribution as to what would be the actual component of the food substances. Much later they purified the substances, but Professor Funk is being credited to exactly pinpoint what ingredient might be there, that a lack of that particular ingredient would lead to the disease beriberi. Okay, so here you find the contribution of Professor Funk was, he proposed that key ingredient could be thiamine, and since it was an amine derivative, he comfortably used this terminology vital amine. In fact, he actually started using this terminology for a wide variety of compounds, and together he started calling them vitamins. But if you carefully look right now, most of the substances what we have over here are not necessarily amine derivatives at all. Some of them are steroidal derivatives. So you see over here, this particular component, what we call it like vital amines. So the amine derivative what is mentioned over there is basically the component which was a precursor for thiamine. Now this part of the century, now having studied well all the essential vital amines, now we have come up with three basic terminologies that would really be connected with the terminology vitamin. So when you say vitamin, what exactly this vitamin is all about? So right now we have a full classification of vitamin, what we call it like fat soluble vitamin, and what we say the water soluble vitamin, but there is a general definition for vitamin. So the terminology goes like this: it's a chemical molecule which is organic in nature, okay, and or at least it's related to the organic molecules, and then it's one of the essential micronutrient required for metabolic function. In other words, a person might take carbohydrate, a person might take protein, a person might take fat, but until you take vitamins, you would not be able to metabolize them. In other words, you would not be able to break them down and have your energy. So that's essential. So that's what happens with all these deficiency diseases or people who suffered from beriberi. The food was available, the macronutrient was available, but your body did not have capacity to break them down and use it. It doesn't mean that they do not have enzymes. They have every ingredient, but without this key ingredient, the entire process will not start. So now much later we know all these vitamins, they act like cofactors for the key enzymes. Now second point, the third point, the second point is that they are essential micronutrients, and whenever you use this word essential, you should always consider they are so vital and your body is not able to produce them or manufacture them. So you are dependent on dietary supplements. And very interesting thing to note over here, not only it's dependent on dietary supplementation, but the quantity required is also very, very small. Okay, so you cannot synthesize, or even if we synthesize, or even if it is required in very small quantities, our body cannot synthesize the need what our body has to have for the metabolism. So we are totally dependent on the diet that we take. Okay, so here we consider vitamins are primarily organic compounds. They are so essential and we are dependent on them in dietary sources in small quantities, and without which you cannot have any metabolic functions happening in your body. Okay. And finally, so can we categorize them as individual components? Yes, you can categorize them as individual components, but most of the vitamins are related. They are groups of components. As you see over here, these groups of components, for example, vitamin A has a series of compounds put together. Vitamin D, you have D2, D3, and we group them, like you say, all groups of compounds that belongs to vitamin D, what do you say, family, or all groups of compounds that belong to vitamin A family. So that way, so in the modern times, we now know you could categorize them as tiny groups, and some of them are still individual molecules as it was there right from the days of discovery. Now you see this picture. So this is a very interesting picture. So it was taken from the fruit market in Barcelona. So this gives you all the colors that you see in the fruits. You see there orange color, red color, green color, and each of the color corresponds to one enriched vitamin that the fruit is going to offer. So that's one of the reason we need to take a diet supplemented with fruits. If we do not have fruits, then we do have problem of getting the sufficient amount of vitamins that is needed for our body's metabolism. Now coming back, what are the other essential components you would consider? So if you say what vitamins are not, so whatever I have told you right now, the definition includes what vitamins are. So you should not confuse vitamins with other substances. For example, minerals. Minerals are not vitamins. So minerals can again be categorized as micro and macro minerals, which are essential, and that will be a separate topic in itself and a subject to study, but our focus would be on vitamins. So vitamins are not minerals. So iron cannot be a vitamin, or a molybdenum cannot be a vitamin, although it's also essential. Then comes one more component, what we call it like essential fatty acids. See, whenever you come across this word essential, not necessarily for vitamins, whenever you have this word essential, it means our body is incapable of making them to the quantity what we need. In some cases, our body cannot simply make those substances, and in the second category, they may make, but it may not be sufficient. So fatty acids, you have some fatty acids our body can break down and produce, but some of the fatty acids are so essential, we are dependent on dietary source. So vitamin is not an essential fatty acid. And again, we have a list of amino acids which are considered very essential. So when you consider these amino acids which are essential, you have almost 21 amino acids in our body, but among these 21 amino acids, there are some minor quantity of amino acids which our body cannot synthesize. So those amino acids, we are dependent on dietary sources. So they also come under essential amino acid category. So we have seen now vitamin is so essential, and vitamin is essential for metabolism, and vitamins have to be supplemented from dietary sources, and vitamins are organic in nature. Okay, but vitamins are not minerals, vitamins are not essential fatty acids, and vitamins are not essential amino acids. So this gives you the key definition of what vitamins are. Now if you go further, I want you to be aware of the work of these people and what exactly their contribution they have done. Although we have already started with the historic background of their work, I would also like to narrate one more experiment, a classical experiment which has been done, especially when they wanted to know the function of the essential vitamins needed for body survival. And if you look at it historically, like the beriberi disease, what you see over here, this is the beriberi disease. So beriberi disease is a disease which results in the lack of B1 vitamin, that is vitamin thiamine. So thiamine deficiency leads to degenerative changes. So can you see over there, the person over here has a very thin limb. So the nerves which supply the muscles degenerate. The nerves require myelin as a protective sheath. If thiamine is not supplied, myelin production would be affected, and if myelin is not there, the nerves will degenerate, and eventually the muscles which supply the nerve will also degenerate. Can you see the sequence of events happening over here? So that's one of the reason why a slow steady depletion of an essential vitamin can eventually give rise to lots of complications and an established disease. And again, one more point, the contribution what was made by Funk and all the three professors is that they not only established the role of vitamins, they also made tremendous contribution in classifying the vitamins. So in this context, do a classification. So you see over here some of the vitamins attributed to the color are fat soluble and some are water soluble. Fat soluble and water soluble. So when you say fat soluble, we have A, D, E and K. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E and vitamin K. And for water soluble, you have all the classes of B vitamins and vitamin C. So these two vitamins are water soluble and all these four vitamins are fat soluble. We do have other minor vitamins, but these are the two major categories of vitamins. So whenever you look at the colored appearance of the fruits, most of the colored vitamins come under fat soluble category. And among these two vitamins, if you consider, the water soluble vitamins are very labile, very thermolabile. So that's one of the reason whenever we process food or whenever we cook food, we are more likely to degrade B category of vitamins and C category of vitamins. So that's one of the reason we are always recommended to take fresh fruits. Whenever you take a fruit and you cook it, you destroy all these water soluble vitamins. But these vitamins are well preserved and these vitamins are substituted. And one more historic point I would like to make. So Hopkins made one more contribution, especially during the First World War. His contribution was so essential that all the supplies, food supplies which were given to the army soldiers, because you have to make the food and supply them to the war terminals, and the food being processed and sent, if you cannot maintain the freshness, the soldiers would eventually suffer from deficiency diseases. So they were looking at food supplies which will give you vital calories. So they were also looking at economic sources. So there was this particular margarine, what we call it, like the vegetable oils were hydrogenated, and margarine were saturated vegetable oils, and these oils provided essential calories because they are packed with energy. But advantage was they did not have much advantage over butter. Hopkins' work pinpointed why butter is superior to margarine, which is from a vegetable source, because butter naturally contains vitamin D and vitamin A, because butter is derived from milk and you have a residual amount of D and A, especially D is more. And what he suggested was margarine is an economic source compared to butter, but if you could supplement margarine with vitamin D and vitamin A, you will have an economic food, at the same time the food would be complete. So that was the contribution of Hopkins, and this suggestion runs down even in this generation. So you find lot of oils which are being sold in the market, and you find over there this word, this oil is enriched with vitamin A, this oil is enriched with vitamin D, E. So this particular idea of enriching foods with vitamins have been recommended from the suggestions made by Dr. Hopkins way back in the First World War. So that's how the modern day food technology had derived this advantage of identifying individual components which are so essential, and keeping these individual components in frame, they have made a list of all those components which has to be included into the final food preparation to make the food complete. In other words, when we consider what we say as complete or balanced food, we need to have all these ingredients put together. So of all the ingredients apart from the macronutrients, all these three are essential. Apart from these three, the othermost and the vital would be vitamins. Okay, so we now go over there to one more way of quantifying vitamins. So right now we saw what vitamins are, we had a brief classification of vitamins, and now we are going to look at how much quantity of vitamins are required on a daily basis. So here we have certain terminologies. So today I thought I can introduce you to one particular terminology, what we call it like reference nutrient intakes, what we call it like the RNI. There are daily allowance calculations for vitamins, and this is one of the popular way of specifying how much amount of vitamins is needed on a daily basis. See, you do have a problem. Although vitamins are so essential, if you lack vitamin, you end up in deficiency diseases. Suppose a person is overcautious, they start gulping themselves with so much of vitamins. Do they have a better advantage of taking too much of vitamins? No, not necessarily. Too much of vitamins again will give rise to one more category of diseases, what we call it as hypervitaminosis. Hypervitaminosis. This is a condition where too much of anything is good for nothing. You know this standard proverb. This applies even to vitamins. So either you should not lack vitamins, either you should not have an unusual quantity of vitamins. Say for example, if you have too much of vitamin A, the skin will start peeling off, and too much of vitamin D, you start having liver diseases. The symptoms will resemble that a kind of a jaundice. So you do have all these problems. So what people have done down the days, food scientists and nutritional specialists and physicians who are working on nutritional diet supplements have come up with this idea of determining what would be the average intake of vitamin that is needed. So they have just calculated a kind of a format where you need to know what would be the daily requirement of vitamins. So what we do, that's one of the reason we take a wide variety of food. We don't stick on with only one particular variety of food. The reason why we stick on with a variety of food is that the vitamins present in certain foods will not be there in the other foods. So what they have done, you look over here, RNAi. So RNI is basically the amount of nutrient that is enough to ensure that the needs of nearly all a group of 97.5% are being met. So what exactly this means? If you could look into the graph, you will understand. So if you could do a plot of the percentage of population and the individual requirement, they have made a bell curve. So the bell curve says that you do have a standard deviation. So what they have done, they have studied the intake of vitamins at different concentrations through a selected wide variety of population, and to a selected group of wide variety of population, and what they have done, they have made a plot. The plot says that whenever a particular concentration of vitamin is taken, if the concentration is going to be such that you have 2 times the standard deviation of the concentration taken, if you take a concentration lower to this part of the curve, what we call it like the lower threshold intake, and the other set of the population who have been taking too much of the concentration of the vitamin. So either way, so you have the lower end where the people were taking less amount of vitamins, and on the other side people were taking too much amount of vitamins. So both suffered from some kind of disorders, people on the lower threshold as well as people on the higher threshold, whereas this set where they had been supplemented with essential vitamins with a particular concentration were found to be healthy in every aspect. So that's why they have made a study for all the vitamins over a period of time, and they have made a chart, and this chart is what we call it like the reference nutrient index. So reference nutrient index applies not only to vitamins, you do have it for proteins, you do have it for minerals, and it's been also studied for different age and gender populations, and they say when it meets the sufficient requirement for 97.5% of the group. So it means what? Majority of the group are found to be healthy if their intake of vitamins lies within this average value. So that's what we consider as the essential, balanced, healthy approach for the intake of vitamins, or the amount of vitamins that should go into a food product. Now if you look at it, the lower reference nutrient intake. So what do you mean by lower reference nutrient intake? So it means that the amount of nutrient that is enough for only a small group of people in a group who have lower requirements. So it means what? Let's say children, since their overall intake of food is very less, the amount of vitamins what they exactly need would also be less. Not only for children, there are certain category of populations compared to the overall population, their intake of vitamins, even if they take less, their body metabolism would be able to work out with that. So that's one of the reason they have calculated this value where the minimum requirement that you need to have. So if you go below this minimal requirement, people definitely suffer from deficiency diseases. So once you fix a value within this bell curve, the concentration of vitamins needed for therapy, we do not have any problem, and the people will not suffer from deficiency diseases. So let's take a quick recap of the topic what we have done today. So I started with the historical basis of who discovered vitamins, or this topic of vitamins. So we saw Professor Hopkins and Professor Christian Hickman, and the terminology was introduced by Professor Funk, and we also saw the definition of vitamins, what exactly vitamins are, their and their difference between other essential substances like minerals, fatty acids and amino acids. And I also gave you a brief classifications of vitamin, fat soluble and water soluble vitamin, and I have also given a note on what standard that we use for the amount of vitamins that an average person should take. So I hope this information was useful for you, and in the coming sessions we would elaborate more on individual vitamins, their role, their function, and what kind of effect they are going to have on the metabolism. I would like to wind up with a final note. Of all the vitamins, apart from this historical note, there is a story about Captain Cook. People were suffering from a disease called scurvy. Now this side of the years, we know scurvy is caused by vitamin C deficiency, but in the early days, sailors who had to store up their food reserves were always forced to take their food which was already packed, so they did not have access to fresh food. So one of the classical experiments for clinical trial was conducted on vitamins. So what he did was, all those accepted remedies in that particular part of the time included even meat, fresh lime juices and so on. So Captain Hopkins did this particular study, and he came up with this particular idea of using lemon drops, fresh lemon drops in the treatment of scurvy, and they found it really useful. So that's one of the historical note that goes way beyond. Even the idea of vitamins were not known to people. So that was the time point when people realized that fresh